Okay. Scan this drawing in. Yeah. Sit. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Hey, wait a minute. What is this? Whoa. Nice. Welcome back to Nomad Boatbuilding. I'm Mark Rudin, and we're building the Catalina Wherry. In the last episode, we used the latest 3D modeling technology to produce a half-hull model for visualization. This week, we're going to take our concept a little closer to completion. So why don't you sit back and relax and let me take care of the work. All right, so we have our first, what I would call first presentation drawing for the client. Look at the model version of that, and it's the model's a little bit, well, the model is a lot rough. The purpose of the model really wasn't to do much other than sort of try and understand the relationships between the box keel and the hull and how I can try and figure out how those interact. So from that perspective, the model was a good way to go, and it allowed me to play around with this idea of having these very distinctive plank lines aft here that kind of feather out towards the bow. So we'll call that a success for the most part, but it's not a great looking model, and the lines are a little rough, especially here. The shear line here is really kind of terrible. We'll chalk that up to experience and put it to the side and not worry about it again. Now I sent these lines off to Ian Outred for his input, and he came back with a very reasonable suggestion. The only thing he suggested was to raise this shear line amidships about 1.5 inches, and I think he's very much about right. And when I sent off the same drawings to my client, he had very much a similar response to it, and my latest interaction with him had him sort of bounce back a slightly revised version of the drawing that he did up, and he raised the shear a little bit and raised the stern a little bit, and also brought the stem forward a little bit so it's not quite such a plumb stem. So we're going to go ahead with that, and we'll make use of those changes. Okay, so let's get out our drawing paper and get started. As always, I'll just start with drawing the grid, and I'm going to use a slightly sharper pencil this time around, so these lines may not be quite as pronounced as they were before, and that's partially because I just want to make sure that we are bringing our accuracy up just a little bit. One thing I wish I had done is to produce a drawing of just the grid. Upon this, I would probably add the major proposed dimensions for the boat, that is the length and the beam and the width. And the idea behind this would be to use it as an underlay for both these initial sketches and also for the larger scaled finished drawings. Now the reason for doing this would be to prevent dimensional creep, which is something that will happen if you trace from one drawing to the next over and over again, and step by step you tend to push the design beyond its original dimensions just because you're trying to trace pencil lines through and not an entirely clear substrate. That is, the paper we're working on is translucent but not clear. This is something I ran into in this design process, and had I done just an initial drawing of the grid, which I would use each time to get a new drawing started, it would have prevented a lot of these issues. So what do we got here? Check our length. 15 foot 3 inches right now. What I need to be very careful of is that I don't let this thing grow beyond our ability to scarf plywood. So let's just do a quick little check. Okay, we're just gonna take a marker, mark it there, and I guess he's adding about 1/4 inch, so that would make this, I think, 15 foot 6. I don't quite remember what I had here. So there's 15 foot 3, I think I'm at like 15 foot 4 inches. Okay, so we'll say it's working out to about 15 foot 6. And now the goal here is to take that, okay, and then we just flip that over and we measure the length. So this is basically an expansion, and that just comes to 16 foot, in fact just a hair over. So that's problematic. What I need is to be able to take two 8-foot lengths of material and scarf them together. These are 1/4 inch thick. We want scarves that are probably like an 8-to-1 scarf is going to be 2 inches long. We want like closer to like a 12-to-1 scarf, which is better. But the bare minimum 6-to-1. What that means is I'm going to have to try and keep these changes to within these parameters, which means and I can't just swing that stem out as Joseph has done. I've got to keep it contained, which is fine. I'll just redraw that shape. And what I've done here, I've created nice clean stations and let the sort of the tail ends of these become sort of a whatever number. So in between the first and last, we have very even station spacings, and then the last ones we've just let it run wild. And one thing you can do, which isn't a terrible idea, is in fact just you could start at one end and you have even spacings, and then you just let the very last one run wild. All right, let's start with raising our shear. 1.5 inches. We'll leave the stem right where it is. I wonder how much Joseph brought the stern up. So I can use relative scale. Okay, so if we go like halfway between the shear strake, something like that. Kind of always do this the same way. I'll hit my primary points that need to be attended to. And then before I try and do anything else, I'll just swing the tail end of the batten out. Alright, and then you want to get down and sight down along that line if you can. This is something we definitely do when we're working on the loft floor. It's a little harder, strangely enough, it's harder to do on the drafting board just because I think the scale's a bit smaller. It's a bit harder to pick out these little variances. Okay. One little trick when you're drawing a line, you want to keep it consistent. You got to roll your pencil as you draw it. Something you'll see me doing. I don't even think about doing it anymore. It just happens. Okay, I'm not going to worry about the shear plank or anything like that right now. This is just the bare lines that we're going to do. Okay. We'll get that transom break, which we decided was going to be 30 degrees, so that's easy. An interesting thing is now we've raised that transom a little bit, which means that our keel just shortened up a little tiny bit too. If we're maintaining that same angle. Now for the stem. And this is the most delicate part. This is where you might want to pull out some of your other sweeps. So we can get sort of a general idea as to what Joseph was looking at here. This has always been a bit of a favorite sweep of mine for doing stems. maybe not today. Actually, that's not too bad. Okay, well, I've been playing around with this drawing, trying to mimic this stem profile. I can't quite get it. You'd think it'd be a simple enough thing to do, but it's amazingly difficult. I think I almost have to freehand this in just to, and then find the sweep that matches it. Alright, so what I'm doing now is I'm just tracing out my lines. I'm trying to refine them just a little tiny bit. Mostly they look pretty good to me. Tweaking my bow a little bit, however, because it was a little oversized in terms of the reduction or the width I gave it right at the stem band. And we're still in the cartoon stage, really, so I don't have to worry too much about getting super accurate at all. I will be scaling off this drawing a bit. All right, let's draw that in. This is the shear line. Alright, I think we will do the width of the keel now. So we need to pick up this line or the heel. Okay, we got to make sure we draw on our center line here. Debating whether or not to widen this keel a little bit. I think I'm just going to widen it a tiny bit. I'm trying to, what do we have right now? I think I had it at 12 inches. Oh, no, we're a little wider. So we're at 14 inches. 14 inches, so that's like that wide amidships. Quick comparison. Yeah, so he's got 11 maybe. This is even less. If I look at the New York Day skiff, I mean, it's a lot broader. Different boat, oh, let's remember that. Different boat. Pull up that width. We got like, yeah, 24, not 36, but like maybe 32 inches or something like that. It's a 23-foot boat. Okay. So I'd say scaling back to this, it's maybe like 18 to 20 inches. Since at the immediate moment I'm not going to be developing a particularly refined set of lines, I think I'm going to go ahead and widen that just a touch. Because I know my customer was talking about being able to sort of have some wiggle room, be able to stand up, stretch his legs if possible. Now, got a little bit of a knuckle there. When I was looking at that video of the Seabright skiff, the one thing that did strike me was how wide the bottom was that fellow was using. Okay. So that basically represents what our keel width is down on the bottom there. What I need is the difference in height that I had before. So that was there. That goes to there. That goes to there. I can see right now that raising the transom along with the shear is not going to have the effect that I want. For one thing, the shear still has just as much sweep as it did before. And now by raising the transom without raising the keel, it's going to affect the interaction between the transom and the planking, and it's going to cause things to go sideways, frankly. In order to correct this, I ended up trying to change the shape of the transom beyond what the desired transom was in the first place. I'm going to blame this misdirection on too many cooks. I really should have stuck with one person's opinion, and that person should have been the real professional in the room, which is Ian Outred. Now, while this cost me a bunch of time and effort, it did provide me with a little bit of an education, and so for that, I'm thankful.
I should give this a little bit of shape. Dead flat is not going to be super pretty. There we go. So there's our point there. This point right here. Carry it down. We'll do lay it there and draw it across. That's a big difference. Feels like a big, huge change from what was there before. Why is that so much higher? Didn't I pick that off very well? Well, maybe I need it slightly different. Let's do this. Quick comparison to our master reference drawing. Yeah, I think we're pretty good. There's a point at which you have to decide that you're building your own boat, not someone else's. Well, by that I mean your own design and not someone else's design. And you gotta proceed accordingly. So bring that over. I think I'm going to leave the one at the bow exactly where it is. Now, the only thing I'm thinking is the width of these planks. Nice fair lines. So let's see. Draw that one in. Okay, so now we carry this up. We need a midship shape to carry on, so let's figure that out. So here's our height for midships. And I'm drawing this on both sides. And we have our half breadth. So just going to draw that into our keel. Right there. And now our shape. There. These are arbitrary lines just to help us transfer the shape. Interesting how, if I recall, I did two different sort of midship profiles, and Looks like I'm practically nailing the second one in perfectly. Okay, well here's our refined design, and I'm sorry for not doing a lot of this on camera. The fact of the matter is it's a little hard to sort of think and work, and especially because my camera is actually sort of right here where my head needs to be, and I keep banging into it. See him right there. We are pretty much at what I feel is like my finished set of lines. I've tweaked things a little bit here and there. There's probably going to be another couple of tweaks, but this is the cartoon, so I just wanted to make sure I'm like pretty close. There's still some funny anomalies happening with these frames back here, but I'm not going to worry too much about it because I think in general I like what I have. And the next step is to take this up to a, a drawing that's 50% bigger, where I will do a final refinement of all these lines.
Now perhaps you can see that I'm getting way ahead of myself. By focusing on the plank lines and the body lines, I'm really wasting my time here. It's because of the box keel and the faceted nature of the transom that I found myself obsessing over these plank lines, but I really shouldn't have. I should have kept things simple.
All right, well, I thought we were done with our initial design, and it looks like we have a little bit more to go. So I presented this to Joe, and he likes it. He likes it a lot. Couple little minor details, though. One of them is that the forefoot, which is sharp at the moment, which I had initially rounded off, and then he did a sketch in which sharpened it up, and so I copied that sharpened up sketch. It turns out he had just he did the sketch real fast, and he wanted that to be a softer forefoot anyway, so that's one thing we're going to change. The other thing he noted was that our transom shape, which was, let's bear in mind that this is the really important detail for him, that the transom shape seems to have lost the character that it had, and there's a reason for that, and that is because when Joe asked me to raise the stern a little bit, I had to play around with that transom. And I tried raising the transom up just the way it was, but I felt like the garbage was getting really way too big. And so then I stretched it back down and I stretched it up a little bit. And basically, I changed the geometry of this transom enough that it's no longer what he was hoping for. And he also would like it to have just two planks under here as opposed to three. He also noted that it looked like we'd lost a little bit of rocker, and it's possible that over the multiple generations of this design we have, this has slowly been dropping by a pencil width each time, and yeah, it does look like it's a little bit lower than it was before. So we're gonna redraw it as what's gonna happen, and we're gonna tweak it just a little bit. So I'm gonna actually bring that transom down a little bit because I feel like it is, even though we brought this up a hair, we also brought this up. So it didn't really change the amount of shear that we had all that much. I'm going to leave this the way it is. I'm going to bring this down a hair. I kind of like the bow the way it is. We'll probably leave that alone. And then we're going to try and go back to our last transom and squeeze that onto there. And I'm going to play around with maybe changing the size of this second plank such that it widens it out a bit and makes us allows us to have two planks under here instead of three. Now that certainly does affect the shape of our boat. It's going to make it a little more faceted, but I think that's okay. If we ended up going with a solid garboard as well, that means it's not such a terrible thing, because then you got one big plank here and it transitions to two other wider planks, which below the water line is not uncommon to have wider planks. And then you have just two somewhat narrower ones along the shear line, which is the ones that you really notice. Below that, you don't really notice this stuff so much. So that's the plan. All right, well, here we go. This is our final set of lines. I mean, there's probably a couple little lines that will get tweaked a little bit in the finished version. My shear line here looks like it's a bit full up forward. Maybe you can tweak up a little bit. But anyhow, I'm done screwing around with it because it is really laborious trying to make everything jive together. We managed to sneak this down to basically a 5-plank boat with the garboards being quite wide, but a single plank. I think that's going to be just fine, actually. Trying to get this transition from this knuckle through to sort of not having a knuckle soonly is pretty tricky, actually. And the more I play with this, the more I realize that this like hull form is really born of people building by eye, because trying to figure it out, trying to make it work on paper is really tough. Whereas if you're just doing it by eye and you started out by just making this bottom, and then throwing a couple planks on that come up to a stem and then parking a transom on top of that, and in some ways it's easier to do it in place on a finished boat than it is to try and do it ahead of time on paper. So anyway, I've presented this to Joe. I think we got everything that he asked for, really. Softened up the forefoot, tweaked that rocker up just a little bit, and I tamed the shear a little bit because I felt like it was getting a bit too jaunty. It's kind of funny because if I look back, it's overlay. This is our last version of it, the first final version. And yeah, that's the transon's back where it was. Stem is about where it was. Raised up that shear a little bit. Everything else is really very similar for the most part.
It's because of the faceted shape of that transom and how the box keel interacts with the rest of the hull that I felt like I needed to play around with working through all those plank shapes and body plan shapes to try and get this design looking right. But I really should have just stuck with the major shapes of the boat, that being the profile, the main plan view, and the shape of the transom, and maybe one midship shape until I got the design closer to the finished product and then worried about all of the planks. And in fact, I shouldn't have even worked with the faceted shape of that transom at all. I really should have just found out a way to round that out and then worry about how the planks lay on it at a later stage. Now, trying to do the lofting with just the plank shapes, not using water lines or buttock lines or anything like that, well, that was a big waste of time, and that will come back to bite me over and over again throughout this process. But you know what they say, hindsight is 20/20. We benefit from the good decisions we make and we suffer from the bad decisions. But hopefully, we can learn from those bad decisions and they will benefit us in the future. These videos are made possible through the generous support of viewers like you. If you'd like to support these videos, you can join me on Patreon. There's links in the corner down in the description. Or you can use the heart-shaped super thanks button right there on your screen. Any way you support me, I'm very much appreciative of it. I want to thank my newest supporters on Patreon, Craig Flowers and Jack Nightingale, and a special shout out to Paul in San Juan Island and Mouse Freeman here in Victoria for just sending me some good old-fashioned folding money. And we'll be back again soon. Thanks for watching.